How do we make that interesting to the general public? Something we need to work on, but it's the presentation on how we give it to keep their attention is the most important at this point.
Welcome to Interfaces, the podcast of words and encounters. Interfaces are frontiers, contact zones, where things meet and transform. Each episode, one word, one interview. Today's word is communication beyond with Craig Della.
Welcome back, Craig, and thank you for being again with us, Interfaces, the podcast, to talk about, again, communication. But this time, thanks to you, this time, communication with the public. So, public communication often comes with events. Such as conservation unveiled or an exhibition opening with a media coverage. In your opinion, do these moments give a fair picture of conservation, or do they risk distorting it?
I think there's a great risk in distorting it. I'm not saying that they're all guilty, but general what we call the popular press, the newspapers, magazines, and that the writers, the journalists, the authors of them often themselves don't understand or have misconceptions, and so they'll put that out to their public audience and be somewhat of the cause of any misinterpretation or misconceptions about it. I don't think us as conservators do that, but journalists will do it, and quite often, and it's a problem. It's a problem. I think when conservation is communicated to a public audience, best is, let's say, within a museum exhibition, where they'll have and more we're seeing this more and more, where conservation included, the process behind the preservation of the artwork they're viewing on the wall. Those will be written by the conservators, and that'll give a better impression. But I would love to see more and more of that within our museums and institutions, of conservation being included as part of the exhibit, how this happened. But when it's done in the general press, it is lacking, yes.
And in your opinion, why conservators are not so represented when there is a mass media coverage of an event like this, or communication about conservation?
Well, that's a good question. I think some of the fault lies with us in not putting ourselves out there more and more, of being part of that wider area. The conservation is still, to a lot of people, a very new or very select and small part of the world, as opposed to the big name archaeologists or the big name architects and things like that. Those professions have been around for a long, long time, whereas conservation is, as a profession, is relatively new to a lot of people. And so that's one area that we need to work on, is to bring ourselves to that level in the eyes of general public, but more importantly, the people who are writing these things to the general public, journalists and things like that. It's an uphill battle, and it always has been, and it will be for a while, but we hold some of that blame.
Yeah, and I have the impression that the public very often equates the conservation with the intervention, the visible intervention. And yet much of the work, intellectual, ethical, and preventive, all the research, study, and the critical thinking that there is beyond a single intervention is completely lost or unseen, unperceived. In your opinion, if you agree, how can we make this complexity clear without losing the attention of the big public?
is all in the presentation. I mean, some of that can be rather droll to a lot of people, very, unexciting. How do we make it exciting? Well, the presenter has to have some sort of charisma about them to make it interesting. Some of the most successful science communicators, let's say like Carl Sagan or Neil deGrasse Tyson, I mean, they're charismatic and they make their subject interesting because they have that way of connecting with the public. And so that's something that we need to work on ourselves. I don't know. It's not easy, but we have to make it what they will call make it sexy. And how do we do that? I mean, something as academic as art history and technical art history and all of that. How do we make that interesting to the general public? Something we need to work on. But it's the presentation on how we give it to keep their attention is the most important at this point.
And do you think that what we can find on the internet can help in this making the conservation sexy for the big public?
Well, a lot of the problem I find is that there are some very popular, we'll say, conservation, I put that in air quotes, videos out there that are found by a lot of people, but the content within those videos is poor, very, very poor. And they tend to make it about themselves and not about the work. They make it, they're the video, the YouTube star, the influencer, and it's not so much about the work, it's about them. Finding that balance is often very, very difficult to put something together that is informational, but still can hold their attention from a charismatic point of view. Finding that balance is tough. Is it out there? I'm sure it is. But I couldn't name who it is right now. But we need more of that.
And what about the institution? Because also institution and organization have a presence online, and they do communicate about their mission, and sometimes also about conservation when they do conservation.
They do, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them out there.
There are different approach from just one institution can have different voices online. But what I have seen, there can be the entertainment approach, but also the dissemination approach, and let people know, the people who actually do the work inside the institution. There are several aspects that there is not just one way to do communication to the public when it comes to institution. I don't know if you have noticed that.
I have noticed that. The ones that are dissemination tend to be the less than exciting ones, the ones that really don't hold a public's interest. And then there's the entertaining ones that will be more holding someone's public but doesn't have any real information within them. Making that blend, putting those two together is the trick. And the people who, the producers of these videos, the director, as it were, or the cameraman or whatever who is directing this, they were often the ones that are calling the shots on how it's going to be produced, and they often will side more with the entertainment part and say, oh well, that nobody wants to hear about that. We want to hear about the sexy part. And so we need to and so as the talent, as it were, the person on the screen doing the talking, who will often be the conservator, they have to fight back and say, no, this has to be said as well. And there are a lot of institutions who do a good job, and there are some who don't, and so it's not everything is great. Some's pretty good though.
And what do you think about your groups and your pages and your YouTube channel? Do you think that these somehow can be help bridge the gap between experts and non-experts? Can this be a first access, or it's too professional, too specialized, the content you share to help this way in this?
Well, what I've got on my YouTube channel is really geared towards the conservation professional, those of us in the field, as opposed to, it was never really geared towards the general public. Do we need more of that content? Yes. But like I say, a lot of the stuff that I do see out there doing that's geared towards the public, not very good and harmful. I won't mention any names, but there are a few.
Maybe it would be interesting to have a platform that is specialized and that privilege the process instead of the people or the object. But what is the process of the conservation process from zero and why it is done, and going through until the sexy part, as you said.
Yeah. Well, we need to create more of that. I mean, that's almost a full-time job, creating content in itself. And but not everybody is up to the task, or has that skill. I don't create content myself, and I have no real, every time I think that maybe I should, I can't think of anything really interesting to talk about myself. But I'm terribly jaded. But yeah, it would be nice if we had someone who was a little more professional in their approach doing these types of videos. Like I say, the ones that I do see out there, the popular ones are just, they're not representative of what we really are.
Or just someone starting a YouTube channel or something like that, a channel, just a page or something, where doing a parallel job to the job you're already doing, but for professional content, just to show the process, and someone that does the same work that you do with papers and in selecting papers to guarantee that there is a quality in what you share, do the same things with this other kind of content that document the process in a way that is understandable by also non-experts. So we are launching a call for someone who wanted to make this work, maybe. Maybe they can get in contact with you if there is someone.
Maybe. I brought up Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he has a YouTube channel called Star Talk, and I love it. He talks, and he's an astrophysicist, highly trained, but he's got that charisma, and he has those videos in which he can really engage the audience in a very complicated subject matter, but brings it more down to earth without making it sound silly. I don't think we really have anyone of that caliber doing that type of thing for us, and that would be nice to have if we could find someone. Those are not inexpensive to create, and so finding funding to do it and do it correctly, well, that's a trick. And where are we going to find that? Who's going to fund something like that? It would be a full-time endeavor, but it would be the type of thing like what he does, where he has talks on certain subjects and has experts in the fields on the subjects that he's talking on, but he makes it very engaging. They laugh a lot, and they engage the audience, and their audience is the general public. It's not amongst other astrophysicists. We need something like that, and I would love if something like that would come across. And if there is one out there that I'm unaware of, please let me know, and maybe we can expand on it. But I haven't seen one yet.
You never know. Maybe this person or those persons are listening, and they can feel a little encouraged that they are not just they're not crazy if they think about something like that. They can just get in contact with you and start to talk about it.
Yeah,
just to talk. Yeah. It's a first step, and you never know.
The more we reach out to the public and make what we do exciting, I think all of us, I mean, making money in conservation. And I'm talking about, doing the bench work, the intervention, the work itself, having things in our lab to make money on, to work on, will increase the more the public knows about us and what we do. And it would benefit all of us as a community to raise the professionalism of careers of conservation as a profession. The more we reach out to the general public, but we got to do it again. We got to do it in a way that engages them and teaches them something at the same time. That blend between entertainment and dissemination of good information, the blend of those two, and that's what Neil Tyson does with his Star Talk thing. He makes that blend, and we need a group of people who can do that as well.
So, if people are listening, those people are listening, just get in contact with Craig and start to talk about it.
Yeah, and there's nothing you can't do without $1 million, right?
Of course, but first there is an idea, then there is a project, then there is a fundraising. Otherwise, you cannot do it in the opposite way.
No, so yeah, I mean, I hope that's something, those types of things can come to fruition. I really do. But in the meantime, we also have to reach out to the general public in what we call the popular press, the newspapers, the magazines. And it's rare that you see them. It'll be, a lot of times the magazine articles will be about a particular project. But so the more of those that get out there, the better. And so, don't be afraid to reach out to the local newspaper in your area, the regional newspaper, or the big city newspaper, and they won't know unless you tell them about it. And if it interests them, they'll take it. If it doesn't, well, you tried. But you just have to put it out there. And again, it has to be about the work, not about yourselves. It's not you, it's the project, it's the work. Your name will be attached to it. And you will, as long as you're attached to it, your name will be there. But you can't make it about just yourself. It's got to be about the work. And that's the mistake I think a lot of people make, is they make it about themselves, which can be off-putting.
This is a misunderstanding of how to use social medias, because the social media can be communication, but they are also marketing.
Yes.
And sometimes people overlap communication and marketing, and this is where it started to do not work. Because you never know, and the trust is the first thing that is missed. And you don't know if it's clearly marketing or clearly communication.
Right. Yeah. And if you lose that trust, then all hope is lost.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I thought for so long before starting this podcast, because I have a business myself, so it had to be about what I like and what I am passionate about, but it hadn't be about my business. This was clear to me.
It's a fine line. It's a fine line.
Yeah.
And I understand that. I've been in private practice, my entire career, and I know the value of marketing. You have to do it. People won't know who you are unless you tell.
Yes, but there is a way. The more you are honest, the more people can feel it and trust you in whatever you do. If you do a podcast because you like the work to talk about words in conservation, because personally I think that we have definition, but we don't allow ourselves, we don't authorize ourselves to make a connection, to think freely about what we feel about, how do we feel about some use of some terms, of course, made also in a very respectful and ethical way. But there must be places when we can authorize words and connection and free critical thinking. And I think this space are lacking because, as you said, everything become easily marketing.
Mhm.
There is a place I have attention, so let's talk about myself. Me, as you said previously. It's very difficult and it takes passion. It takes a lot of respect for this profession because the first thing you have to respect is conservation itself. And then everything is about, as you said, fundraising, making a project and putting it into reality. But I think there are people like who are willing to do something concretely. Just as you said in the previous episode, we have to do network, reach out to each other. Just to talk. You never know what an idea can become if you share it with someone else.
That's true. Very, very true.
And we need it. We need it because the more
We do need it.
the public is aware of what the conservation process is, the more the category of the professionals that are involved in are seen. And if you are seen, you become a more, I will use a big word, powerful and conscious of yourself. It's true. It's true because don't forget that the conservators are at the bottom part of the hierarchy process, conservation process. And I find it a little strange sometimes. You know, I look at everything from the building scale. So I know that in the building scale, I can talk less for the object, museum object, archaeological object, but from a building point of view, conservators are very often at the bottom of the hierarchy. So,
Well, it's true. It's true. You know, even if you work within a museum, you're often at the bottom of the hierarchy, the conservator, which is unfortunate. You know, without the collection, you know, there is no museum, and without the conservator, there's not going to be a collection.
Not for a long time.
Not for a long time. That's right.
So there is just one other topic so that I would like to talk about with you. Looking at campaigns and media narratives, conservation is currently often tied to identity, sustainability, and even climate change. How can communication connect conservation to these larger societal values without turning into a slogan?
Well, there's quite a bit written on the sustainability, but a lot of that discussion is amongst ourselves. As far as a climate change or just our environment in general, I think it's an area where conservation could really step up and connect itself to it. You know, the preservation of you know, huge archaeological sites that are going to be damaged by climate change. You know, how are we going to stabilize the preventative conservation measures that will be required to preserve these sites and these larger outdoor environments? It's something that we should become much more involved with, and it's growing. I see more and more articles coming out on the subject, but we also do have to make the general public aware that we're a part of that process, that we're needed to be part of that scientific endeavor, and it will be scientific. It's, you know, everything is based on chemistry. We have to we have to get ourselves more involved in it and in the discussion itself, and not just amongst ourselves, but to the world at large on why they need to bring in a conservative, at least as a consulting point of view.
I wanted just to ask you, and then I let you go, I promise. I just wanted to ask you something about the future. What, in your opinion, apart of what we already talked about, making a channel, investing a lot, finding people, is there something else that we can do in everyday life, for example, that can help big public to better know what is a conservation process, why it is done, why it is different from other way to approach an object. Is there something else that can be done in everyday life of a conservators?
In everyday life?
Little steps or things like that.
Well, I mentioned this before about museums having more exhibits on conservation. And it needs to go further than just the big museums, the Mets and the Louvres, things like that, the Pradas. It needs to go all the way down to the local historical society to have, something about the conservation and preservation of their collection, why it's done and things like that. Most institutions, most museums do not have a conservation staff. They may have some collections care people or curators who often think that they're the conservators when they're not. So just having even those small exhibits within the cultural institutions, no matter their size, to explain why we preserve them, I think would go a long, long way. The more we create demand, the better off we will be. Create that demand and they'll ask for more. So it's got to go all the way down. What we can do on an everyday basis, I don't know. I think I'd get kicked out of a lot of places if I talked about conservation for 6 hours straight every day. And the news, the local papers, if they maybe do one story a year, they think that's all they need to do. They covered that subject. So it's a hard sell. So we have to go right now. We have to start with that captured audience that's already going to the museums, already going to these small historical societies, these smaller areas, and having some type of display. And what we can do as conservators, we can create those displays for them. Even if it's at our own expense, because it will be, or maybe, get a little bit of funding here and there, but maybe create these displays for them if they're willing to put them up. And then that takes a little bit of salesmanship just to get those put in there. But that's one thing we could do on an everyday thing, is to create these displays, these exhibits for these small museums who I'm sure they'd be more than happy. If you talk about their collection, why are we preserving your collection, their collection? What's in their collection that's been preserved, and how and why? The big question is why do we do this? And but as far as the general press is concerned, that's a harder sell. I mean, you can only do that so many times. So go after that already targeted, that already captured audience, and work with them. I could see that as being something very good. Even if it's just a poster. We've all made posters for a conference. We know how it's done. So we can do those. We can make them. And that's all it needs. Or it could be a small exhibit, with a glass case with some of the tools that go in it, and what we do in our work, the tools used in our work. You get too complicated and you'll turn them off. But you also don't want to make it too simple, or they'll think they can do it themselves. We don't want that. So
I also think that the Ask a Conservator is a very, very nice initiative.
Yes. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's all over. I mean, all of our organizations are doing those, and yeah, they're great. They are great, and we need more of those.
More of those, because you get the information, but you get it to know it by the person the best person who can provide the information. And while doing, you know the person, you know the professional, you know what is the role, what he can pass so much with just one answer.
I think we all can probably use a lesson in on how to communicate better. I mean, engaging an audience is tough. It's hard work. It's not easy, and not everyone has that skill. But it's something we need to develop more within ourselves to be able to do that. And I'll see if there's anything that I can share on my pages that could teach us how to do that. And it doesn't have to be conservation specific, but how to communicate science, let's say, and just substitute the word science for conservation. How do you communicate this better? How do you go about it? And I'm sure there are things out there. I haven't looked for them, but I will. I'll look for them and see and put them up. And the better we get at it ourselves, the more we put out there, the more we create a demand for it, the more we put it out in front of people, the better.
Have you ever thought of making a meetup about communication in conservation?
Me personally, no.
Yeah, to
Maybe
meet
we
people. Yeah, I think
give a seminar on how to do it.
a seminar, a meeting, just to
bear around ideas and get an idea of what we can do as a group, as a community. Yeah.
we can talk.
Well, maybe after this comes out, who knows, we'll pop up. They'll contact you or they'll contact me. We'll see. With any luck.
We'll see. Because this was so inspiring what we were talking about, and I think it could inspire other people.
I hope so.
Other professionals. So I hope so. I'm quite sure it will. I'm quite sure. But if someone wants to come back and contact you, contact me, contact us, and talk about this, let's talk about how to improve how the conservation process and the conservation professionals are perceived, not just in appearance, but in deep, in what counts.
Right.
So once again, thank you so much, Craig,
for
being there and for being so generous.
Well, thank you for asking. I'm glad.
I hope I'm quite sure we will meet again and we will talk again.
I am sure we will.
Thank you, and see you soon.
See you soon. Good night.
Bye.
As we wrap up this episode of Interfaces, thank you for joining me in exploring cultural heritage through words and encounters. A heartfelt thanks goes to the team behind this podcast. Audio, Salvatore Melluso. Graphic design, Emanuela Nosari. Language, Tania Yakovenko. For my Italian listeners, you'll find my books Conservazione delle decorazioni architettoniche and Pitture murali, I degradi di origine meccanica in the show notes, along with all references mentioned today. I look forward to sharing the next word and conversation with you in the upcoming episode of Interfaces.